What are we talking about today?
Oh, we still have no idea what we're talking about.
No, that's not true.
No, actually, we're excited about this podcast
super
episode
excited.
today because we're going right in for the controversial things.
Let's go for it. Let's go in.
So this idea of I want to scale a business, particularly as a new business owner, where you want to have growth, you want to have, you start off with one project, you want to have 2 and 3 and 4 and so on and so forth. And like, you have to have that as a part of a business. And we have this idea of like more work equals more money. And we're going to lean into that today and find out that's not always true.
Yeah, false.
Yeah.
No, not necessarily.
Yeah. Well, true. And
depends on the
yeah.
how you're
You remember that
seeing
movie
up.
Ratatouille, where the chef is what is it? The apprentice comes along and the rat teaches him how to do something. He's like, "Congratulations on your accidental success."
Yes.
Anyway, and I feel like that is something that I've seen so many people come.
Yeah.
Basically, they have an accidental success in their business where their first project goes great.
Okay.
But nonetheless, it just feels so easy, so natural. I mean, I've talked to so many of my friends and it's like, yeah, being a contractor is awesome. Like this job turned out amazing. We made money. The customer's happy. They love us. We got a good review. And then they think, how do we, we made $50,000. So if I get 10 of those, we'll make 500,000. Like it's gonna be so awesome. Like it's so easy. Like everyone whining and complaining about being a contractor.
Yeah.
Like,
easy math.
Easy math. Man, we have it made.
You just zeros,
Yeah. And then on the flip side is somebody that comes to this, their first experience is they couldn't find the right subcontractors. They couldn't source the right materials. They didn't bid enough money in the job. And they're all discouraged and like, this just sucks.
Yeah.
And either scenario, they could come to the conclusion, well, what we need more jobs.
Yeah.
Right. And we need more jobs to fix the mistakes and more jobs to make more money from like an accidental failure. Or we can have an accidental success and think, well, let's just go ahead and go gangbusters and just grow. Yeah. Let's hire 10 people. Let's go for $1 million. And I think what we're leaning into today is process is way more important than results. And a lot of times we don't understand process in the early stages of a young business. And how do you get to the point of getting there is sometimes through some patience and sometimes through some projects that didn't go right.
Did you have any accidental successes?
Oh my word, I wish I did. Everything was so hard.
Too hard.
I had the accidental failures.
Okay.
No, I think for me, I have had a few projects that were, thank God they weren't the first ones, but I had some projects that went really, really well. But some of those harder projects really set the expectation for me of like, okay, that went really well. But then in analyzing it later, you could reflect on, well, that was an amazing client. Like not everybody's that way. You could have an amazing like project scope of like everything in that project. It was things that we were really good at. We got done quickly. We found the right people. Yeah. So to be able to analyze it later and say, what were the things that really went well?
Yeah. As you're talking about that, it's making me think, I'm like, which scenario is worse, right? Or like more risky, right? Like starting with an accidental success or starting with an accidental failure. Right.
I think success.
I think so too.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, a failure, you at least, you have a problem, and you're like, okay, I can solve this and I can break it down of like, how can we be better? Right. If you have an accidental success, you're like, it might be easy to get cocky, right? With that and be like, oh, I've got this, got it in the bag. I can just do that more times like you're talking about, at least and I think that's why a lot of people are like, I learned way more from failure than I do success. Yeah. Right. And anyway, it's just an interesting.
No, it's a good call out. So many times. Well, which was more painful too. Yeah, I mean, success is just fleeting. I want more of that. Whereas pain is like, wow, how do we not do that again?
Good point.
And it stays with you longer.
Yeah,
typically.
True.
I try to forget bad things.
Yeah.
But, and I think also, yeah, running the numbers before you start a business is so critical, because we deal with hypotheticals, but then, and I think that's an important first step. But you say, okay, well, if I do this much work and this is my hard costs, let's just say we take $100,000 example of like, if we did $100,000 of work and the labor for that was $35,000, the materials cost $35,000, we've got $30,000 left over. That's plenty of margin. 30% will be great. That'll cover our overhead and our equipment. And then suddenly you recognize, how did we not make money? And we had all that leftover of money. And you recognize, well, we had some overruns in the labor. There's a few material things we missed. And, there was a mistake we made. And then the insurance cost more than we thought it would. And workman's comps rates are higher. Those are the things that I reflect back on my first experiences in business and recognize, man, oh man, those hypothetical scenarios I ran in my head were just
hypothetical scenarios.
Really kind of just wrong. And then I see other people doing it as well. Hey, I have an idea. We got this is a $15 million idea, Kinsey, and you hear the numbers and you're like, so many things that they're just so really just far-fetched.
Yeah, you can't predict a lot of things.
Outside of the person's control, and also not informed.
Right.
Like, it's the first time you ever did it. So let's talk about, like, in order to actually have more jobs equaling more money, you need to have something that's replicable, something that you can repeat over and over and over again with consistent results. Yeah. And I think just having one successful project, fantastic, great job. If that's your experience, keep it up. Yeah. But you also need to look at what were the elements of the success, and looking at, I don't wish failure on anybody.
Totally.
Just because it's a better teacher sometimes doesn't mean you should go that direction.
Right. Yeah,
don't go skip the pain.
Yeah, that's not our goal in life is to fail, right? Yeah.
Yes. It is more or less just pointing out that success can insulate you from the fact that you might be going down a risky path.
Yeah, it's a really good call out.
I think some of the things that really stand out when we talk about process is you don't have a formula with just one experience. You don't have a good sampling. If you're looking at what is a recipe for something, and you did it one time and you don't remember the recipe necessarily, you put a little of this in there, a little flour, a little sugar, and the thing, wow, that was the best pancakes we've ever tasted.
Right.
But then you say, well, go do it again.
Right.
And you think, well, back to the ratatouille example, I'm not sure what that was, but it worked.
Yeah. So how do you get there?
And now you're going to say, okay, what went into that recipe?
Right.
What were the ingredients that actually did work?
Yeah.
And I think that's what you need to document, and then say, okay, let's do that again. Now we can repeat it. And sometimes there's things that are not like a recipe where it's like, flour is going to be flour. Well, customers, good customer, bad customer. I mean,
true. Yeah.
Those are things that are variables.
There's nuance in every job.
Somebody might pay you always on time. One of my contractor friends was talking about a customer. He would say, hey, do you need any money? I mean, that is a godsend. I mean, not everybody says, hey, how you doing? You need another check?
Totally.
Sometimes you have to chase them around and they're not paying you late. So, I mean, those are variables outside of your control sometimes. Now you can make sure you're asking for money on a consistent schedule. But I think that would be one aspect.
Yeah. I think also we talk a lot, we've had a lot of episodes on this, but just knowing your costs too, of like, hey, you may have guessed right, or the margin may have been in there, depending on how you're bidding that original job that you had the accidental success on. But you have to make sure, if you didn't know your costs going into your hard costs, your overhead, your, everything that goes into the building of your business, you've got to make sure you know that before you say yes to the next job or before you scale, right? You talk about overhead a lot. Can you break down, like, what does that look like? Say you go from, a 2-man crew to we're going to go to 10, right? Like, what could that look like? What could that scenario look like from an overhead standpoint and the risk to your business and all that?
I can speak from some personal experience going from 2 people where the overhead can be very, very light. You could be operating out of personal vehicles. You could be using tools that you've accumulated over the years, so you have very little overhead and setup cost. And you also might not have an office. You might not have an office manager or a project manager, all these things. And then as soon as you have a crew of 10 people to keep busy all the time, suddenly there's product to source. There are customers to communicate with. There are expectations that you have on you as a company of scale, with multiple customers that need to, and you need to sell more jobs, you need to estimate more jobs. Like, you're replicating processes that you no longer can mask with just working around the clock.
Right.
And so you as a business owner become sort of diluted so far down that now the quality can suffer on your projects. You don't have the time to manage those jobs anymore. You can have multiple crews in different places that are doing bad work because you can't be out there doing, guiding those processes. And so I think that's where then you recognize, oh, I need a project manager. So now you hire somebody for $100,000 a year to manage a project. And so the overhead can just balloon.
Yeah, tremendous amount of risk.
Yes. Yeah. And the thing that really grabbed me in those moments where I'm scaling a business and growing quickly is suddenly I couldn't even really keep up with how fast the overhead was growing. Because what used to be $50 an hour we could make money, now you charge $80 an hour and make money. Before, there wasn't overhead. We didn't have equipment to depreciate. We didn't have all these. We didn't have a shop. We didn't have tools and all. Suddenly, you have $250,000 of equipment sitting around, and you have a shop, and you have trucks, and you have fuel, and so all of these expenses add up, and suddenly it becomes this sort of puzzle. Like, how did we not make money? We used to make money fine.
Yeah.
So I think to answer that question, like, that's the piece that really can get out of control.
Yeah, just so risky.
Yeah, and so that's the piece too with a, I don't want to say slow scale, but where it's sort of a measured scale where it's saying, okay, the processes are working well, we understand the math, and now we can make a more calculated decision of being, what are the things that we would need to scale?
Mm-hmm.
Well, let's hire somebody that has some project management skill, but also can help perform. Like they could be a foreman and a project manager. Mm-hmm. And sometimes those are like and don't make the mistake of trying to go look for a unicorn of like, this person's going to sell, this person's going to manage projects, and they're going to frame, hang drywall.
Doesn't happen.
Like, that's not a good approach either.
Doesn't exist.
Yeah. Doesn't exist. Or if it does, well, it doesn't exist.
Yeah. Unicorns are not real.
Yeah. And if you find that person, they're going to be your competitor in 6 months,
That's true.
because
they're going to learn
skills,
from you,
right?
and then they're going to go do that.
Don't be surprised when they start their own business and,
that's a good
steal
point.
your customers.
That's a good point.
Because they have the drive, they have the skill, and they're like, why am I working for this guy?
Yeah, I might as well just do the same thing, make more money, right?
Yeah.
I think one thing to note too is like, you don't have to scale, right? Like, don't be blinded by the numbers of, the scenario that you laid out at the beginning of this podcast of, hey, well, if I just multiply that times 10, I'm going to be making bank or whatever. Mm-hmm. Don't be blind by that. And scale is something that you should slowly move into, because your job changes. If you're the guy that's wearing bags on the job, it's not going to be your job anymore, likely, if you hire 10 more people and are having to sell more, because you're probably the sales guy, at that point. And so you're going to have to be the estimator and the sales guy unless you're hiring those people. So it's like, do you really want your role to change before you scale? One
thing I've observed, which is a very bizarre transition for a business owner, is the thing that got them to their early success, that might have been being on the job and performing the work and doing amazing quality things, being the carpenter that everyone loves and looks at the results and says, that's my man. And then that person says, well, I need to go replicate that and hire a bunch of people to do what they were good at. And now shifts roles. I've seen this multiple times where the guy that was amazing out in the field as the business owner, hands-on, being with his crew, now steps back to the office. He sucks at being in the office.
And he hates his job.
Hates his job doing that kind of thing. He's not good at it. Everything's suffering out in the field because he's not out there. And so you've shifted your business, handed off the thing that you were good at to people that aren't good at it, went to doing something that you're not good at. That could be a disaster.
It could be.
And what basically all you were trying to do is scale instead of being like, okay, what do I need actually to make this experience? And that was back to the replicable experience, the repeatable thing. Yep. And it's saying, okay, if I'm going to do more of the thing that we're winning at doing, assuming you have a niche, you found something that works. Okay, we're trim carpenters. We're amazing at this. How do I do more of that?
Yeah. Increase efficiency.
Yeah.
Get, you know what I mean? Like
and the training process, making sure that crew's ready to go and you can check their work and not just assume it's going to be okay. Yeah. They're going to be okay.
Yeah.
We had this conversation in our last podcast with Wyatt about the ship sails best with the captain on deck. Mm-hmm. And that's an element. If you want to scale beyond your abilities to be present, you need captains. Yep. You need people that can run those, or lieutenants, whatever you want to call them, but people that can do amazing job at running a crew.
Right.
Otherwise, don't have multiple crews. You're not ready for it yet.
Yeah, you can't split yourself in 5 different ways.
How many businesses do we know have gone under because they had amazing success early on and they scaled too fast?
Yeah, it's
so many.
A lot.
Yeah. And the other ones that made it, look back, I mean, some of you guys that are listening to this podcast that are now in a stable spot, you can look back at your early experience and say, yep.
I had to course correct.
I nearly didn't make it.
Yeah.
Because I hired 10 people and half of them didn't know what they were doing. And
well, it was us too. Genius.
Oh, man, don't bring up our bad stories.
We're talking about everybody else's problems, not our own.
You guys out there, no, we 100%, I can agree with that in multiple businesses. Right. Yeah, where that early kind of momentum was deceptive.
And I think one thing you talked about earlier is just like the patience with the process, right? Like we've talked about patience, we talked about just continuing to grind and one step in front of the other. But I think if you're working at scaling and at growing your business, it's just going to require an immense amount of patience to be able to get to the level of, it doesn't happen overnight, I guess is the point.
There's this balance between patience and this go-getter mentality. That's why you have your own businesses, because you want to win. Yeah. You have a drive. You have the ability to do hard things that other people around you don't have. Mm-hmm. And then you say, be patient. What do you mean? Like, I'm a driver, I'm a doer, I'm a mover and shaker. Yeah. And somehow you balance the two. Somehow you can be a person with tremendous drive, but also patience.
Yeah.
I think they don't have to be in conflict with each other. It's not one or the other.
Yeah.
You can be a mover and shaker and drive results, but at the same time recognize, I need to step back in this aspect and not be driving to the point of stressing the machine to the point of breaking.
Yeah.
Maybe that's the example,
good.
right? Where you're saying, if you have a saw and you say, well, I'm going to really use this saw efficiently. Well, there's that point of lollygagging around, not pushing the saw through the board or pushing to the point where the thing stops entirely and can't even cut entirely.
Right.
So maybe that's the piece.
That's
being patient of saying this saw cut is going to take a certain amount of time. I'm going to be driving towards a finished cut, but not ripping the board to shred or killing the saw and doing it.
That's a good analogy. I like that.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I just came up with that was
so good. So we didn't even talk about that. I didn't plan it. So let's say I started my own construction company and I just crushed a project, had accidental success. Where should I'm listening to this podcast, right? What's the first step? What should I be doing today to ensure that I don't, that if, let's say I do want to scale, let's say I do, I'm like, oh, I do want more of that. Maybe not to the extent of like, I need 10 crews going, you know what I mean? Or whatever. But what would your advice be to me, I guess?
One of the things I learned the hard way is staying at home and doing nothing is you don't lose any money doing that. And I think that's just the challenge. And it seems so basic. And I think, if you listen to that, you're saying, well, duh, of course. But at the same time, you can have a project where you are just working your tail off, putting in maximum amount of effort, knowing that you'll be giving the project away to somebody else for less than what you paid for it. That's a bad experience to have. Don't ask me how I know. And I think what you learn in that is that this scale and pushing results is a good thing, and it feels awesome to win. Like to your point of like, we just wanted a job, we had a success, like that is fantastic.
Yeah.
But at the same time, looking back and analyzing it and saying, okay, we want to do more of that, but what did we hit on that really worked? Because not every job's the same. And you can have that, like back to the paying client, the performant crew, having all of the products lined up ahead of time, and that could have all just fallen together.
Yeah.
But it's like, let's make sure we did more of that and focus on process, not results, because we can be so results oriented to a fault.
Right.
And I don't mean vision in the sense of like what we want to achieve. That's not what I'm talking about. But you can get so driven. Have you ever known somebody that was so motivated by dollars and cents that they just missed the forest for the trees, so to speak? They were it felt like greed. They were, I want to be rich so bad that they don't even know how to get there.
Wow. They can't
It's
get there.
blinding.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? They can't get there. They never will have any money because they're so blinded by the result that they will never put in the hard work in the process. If you want to be an athlete, if you want to be anybody with success in any area in life, you're going to have to push. You're going to have to grind. Some moments are not going to be...
It's a lot of hours.
Yeah. Some moments are not going to be fun.
No.
And I think that's the advice in this early success of like, okay, let's not get cocky, as you brought up earlier. Let's not just assume that it's a given. Let's analyze what were the ingredients.
Yeah, assess what worked well, what didn't work well, because there were likely still things that didn't go well, even though the dollars came out nicely.
That's a good
on
point.
The other end.
You could have a job that had enough padding where those little mistakes didn't really matter. Yeah. Great customer, really forgiving, really easygoing. I've had a few of those where people are like, oh yeah, that's a change order, understand. And I've even had a few where maybe our process wasn't quite nailed in, dialed in, and change order was late, and the customer's like, oh, don't worry about it, here you go, we'll cover it. And then you have somebody else that says, what? Yeah. We're sticking with the original agreement. We're not paying for a dime more than that. Yeah. Yeah. And that can really hurt.
Yeah, I think that's so good. But then I think just tying in even more to like, how do you get to the formula of making it replicable? We've had podcasts on creating checklists. We've had podcasts on, creating schedules. We've had, you know what I mean? There's just been a lot. Obviously, we promote systems and processes in pretty much every episode. We're like, you cannot be replicable without a manual to follow, and you can't expect someone else to. I guess that would be the call out.
And maybe that's the mistake that we make sometimes, is because you're on site as the crew leader, the boss, the business owner, and everything else, making everything happen. Yeah. And as soon as you step back from that role, maybe that's the missing piece. Maybe that's what made that job successful, is because you camped out there. You made sure when stuff needed to get ordered, it got ordered. When somebody needed to show up, you called them, make sure they showed up. The HVAC guy wasn't on time, you called them.
You called out before mistakes were made.
Yes,
right.
Exactly, right? Yeah, that's not right. That's not right. And the reason why that job was successful, because you were there. Yeah. And then you take that winning ingredient out, and now you delegate it to somebody else, and suddenly you have a failure. Yeah.
And I think that's just a huge caution for someone who's like, hey, I want to scale. Make sure that you're not the piece that's going to like make the
and I've made that
crumble,
mistake where, and the thing about it is you can feel the frustration of being like, aren't there any good people that you can hire to do it? It's like, well, unless you set them up to win, unless you verify that they're capable of doing it, well, don't assume anything.
Yeah, you train them to do so. Yeah.
But Dan
I'm
is
sure
doing with the millwork side, where he's basically setting up the whole university piece for his crew, not assuming them to know what they're doing. In fact, not assuming anything of saying, well, you might be at a level 1 or level 10. Let's figure that out.
And you might think you're a level 10, but our test will see where you land. Yeah. No, I thought that was such a great podcast in terms of just teeing up people to. I think the thing that Dan mentioned in that, obviously, Millworks by Design is a massive finished carpentry company, He has scaled. He has scaled. He's achieved that. But his vision was that. His vision was not to be on the job, but was to create excellent craftsmen to fulfill wonderful projects, And one thing he said on that episode was he wished he would have started a training process earlier. I think that was the thing that
I can
that stuck
identify with
me.
that as well. The interesting thing about training is it feels so costly, so expensive because you're trying to get things done, and sometimes you don't have the margin for that. And I think that might be the one aspect of scale as well, where you nail on you and your buddy, where you just work hand in glove. I had that early on with my brother, and personality-wise, we get along fantastic. When he's my second, we can get amazing things done fast. It's like we're a well-oiled machine working together. We have that here, we can work really, really well together.
Yeah.
And I think you can make assumptions incorrectly that other people you bring to the team that things are just going to work that way.
Yeah.
And then you start realizing, oh, that's actually a rare thing, not a just given.
Yeah. Not an
and
expectation.
so I think building some padding into your early on as a company, building some padding around, we have something that works and our overhead's low, so therefore we should really be cleaning up. And if we want to scale, there's margin to allow for that. Because wasn't it, I think it was also Dan talking about something like a 60 or 70% efficiency loss as soon as you hire something out from yourself to somebody else.
Yeah.
It's like if I can get somebody to function at 30 to 40% of the efficiency that he can bring to the table, that's well worth paying for. Where I found myself is 60%. Feeling frustrated by that. Being like, I work with idiots because they can't work half as good as I can.
Yeah.
And maybe there's an element too where there's no cost to me whatsoever if something takes me twice as long either. I'm not an hourly employee. So there's that element, but there's also of course, I have the drive to see it through. I see the fact that dollars are running out. I'm hustling.
Yeah.
I'm pushing myself.
Yeah.
Like you can't expect that from other people.
Totally. It's your vision. It's your baby.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, time. If it takes me 5 minutes, I'm counting of like what's the most efficient way of making this happen, and how do we drive things? Like that's something you train. That's something you don't expect.
Yeah. No, you don't expect that from anybody on your team. Yeah. I think from what we're talking about, like the warning is, hey, early on in the process, if you're thinking, you had an accidental success, don't scale too premature. Is really like the warning I think that we're saying of like, make sure you dig in, make sure you assess, hey, what are the things we're doing well? And I think it's a constant assessment, right? Because if you do scale, you need to reassess, before you scale more. Or it's not like, oh, well, now we're ready and we don't ever need to do that again. I think it's in terms of process, like add that to your process of assessing, hey, what are the things we're winning at? What are the things we're losing at? Where can we get better? And then steps to actually achieving that.
Yeah, a recap on process. Really pushing back against this idea that more work equals more money. You may be very happy just sticking with a 2-man crew and cleaning up doing that and, stick in that lane and love it.
And that's okay.
And that's great.
Yeah.
You don't have to scale necessarily.
Yep.
But if you do want to scale, these are the cautionary tales of like scaling can kill you.
Yeah.
Scaling's amazing. Yeah. People have done it well, and you can look at them and you say, wow.
Like, wow. Yeah.
Fantastic job.
Yeah.
But there's a certain level of patience and really focusing on these are the process things we need to get, and not just looking at, wow, that guy's got 100 guys on his crew. Amazing. I want that too. Well, that's a result.
Totally.
How he got there was through a lot of work.
Yeah.
And a lot of process focus of saying, okay, in order to get to 100, we have to win with 5.
Yeah.
We have to win with 10.
Yeah.
Win with 15.
That's right.
And if it doesn't work with 5 people, throwing 10 more guys at it is just going to make the problem worse.
Yeah.
Bigger problem. Replicating. Problems just makes them bigger.
Right. Yeah. Makes them bigger problems.
Yes. So if you have a money problem, with one job, and you throw 5 more jobs on it, you're just going to have 5 times as many. Right. 5 times as many problems.
Right. Yeah.
Roughly speaking.
Yeah. No, that's for sure.
Yeah, and hope they work.
That's good.
I mean, if I guess in this spot too, people find themselves in feeling a little lonely, and I think that's something we discover as business owners and as people that are really pushing the envelope, and sometimes your crews don't identify that, they just expect things from you. The people around you aren't necessarily feeling what you feel.
Yeah.
And I think just reminding you guys that there are people that admire what you're doing and appreciate what you're doing and have been in your shoes as well and can say, wow, that's hard to do.
Yeah.
Don't give up on it. Yeah. And even when things are dark in a moment, like tomorrow can be awesome. Yeah. And we've had moments like that. It's like a roller coaster.
Yeah. But you have to have people that can support you, that can call you to greatness and can speak to like where you're going, not maybe where you're at today. That's like good. I think you have to find people who, can wrap their arms around you, come alongside you, and that are maybe in the same place.
Okay, here's a virtual hug, guys. Keep it up.
But I think there are so many people in that same spot, and it's like it is easier than ever to find. I'm not saying community in the sense of like next door. I think there's some contractors that really push back against like, well, I'm not going to go to a networking group with other contractors in my area because we're competition, but there are a lot of ways, even digitally, there's Facebook groups, there's Instagram groups, there's, what I mean? Channel, things like that you can get connected with some people who are motivated, going the same way, struggling with same things, what I mean? So find people to
we had a couple of people come to our office a couple of weeks ago and they were talking about, they're all competitors. They all get together for Saturday morning for breakfast. Yeah, and that's cool. Like 5-6 cool. contractors get together, and obviously they're not telling each other exactly everything, but nonetheless they're bouncing ideas off each other for sure with respect.
Yeah,
that's super cool.
Really cool.
Yeah,
and maybe that's everywhere. I don't know. But
guys, comment. Tell us what you think. Let us know what we're missing.
Yeah,
love the feedback.
We'll catch you next time.